All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Chocolate Travels with Bean to Bar World. My name is Joseph and I am with Trevor from Metiisto Chocolate. Today we're going to learn all about what Metiisto does, and we're going to have a lot of fun learning about how Trevor started this journey and what's going on with Metiisto today. So welcome, Trevor, and thank you for joining me today.
Morning, thanks for having me.
My first question is, which I'm sure you get from a lot of people, is how did your journey into fine chocolate begin, or making chocolate? So I know you started off in Sweden, and did you come across fine chocolate and you really enjoyed it and decided to get into it from there? How did it all start?
So my background is automotive stuff. I'm a panel beater. I don't know what you guys call it. Fixed crashed cars.
Okay.
I grew up in a family that built fabricated race cars and all that kind of stuff. So I have a background in, and of course I come from Alice Springs, which I don't know if everyone knows is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It's in the center of Australia.
Oh, wow.
So there's a kind of attitude when you live 1,500 kilometers away from the closest town that if you can't buy something, you've got to make it. And if you can't make it, you need to find someone who can. So it makes you very diverse and multi-skilled.
Yeah.
I moved to Sweden back in 2003 or 4 for music. I'm a guitarist also.
Okay.
Love Swedish music. Went there just on a whim. I wanted to get away from Australia. I'd had enough. Moved to Australia and basically fell out of love with my job, which I don't think I loved in the first place, and fell in love with French pastry. So I started doing a lot of French pastry on the side until ultimately I opened my own chocolaterie and patisserie, which kind of got me into Valrhona and Cluzel and that kind of chocolate, which I was using. And yeah, I was using that chocolate because it was the best stuff I could buy. And, you know, that at the time, that was the mentality too. This is really good chocolate, yada, yada, yada. But that chocolate is really common in Sweden. You can buy Cluzel and Demori and Amadei everywhere in Sweden, little coffee shops in every little town. And it was on chance that I met Alan McClure from Patrick Chocolate back in 2010 or 11, I believe it was, at my coffee supplier. They wanted to bring Patrick Chocolate to Sweden and they were really excited about it. So Alan was there. And I met this funny little guy that was making chocolate by himself, which was really weird. And I hadn't even thought about it up until that point. So I kept in contact with him a little bit and I started playing around with it myself. And Metiisto started in 2011. Started mucking around with chocolate.
When you tried his chocolate, did you think, wow, this is very different than Valrhona, Michel Cluzel, all those? Did you notice anything?
I think it's hard with his chocolate is really good. I think we've all tried chocolates over the years that kind of they change the way you see chocolate in not the way that you would like to. Sometimes it can be a really bad experience. Alan's chocolate was really smooth, so I understood that, and it was like a more vibrant, less fatty, if you know what I mean. It wasn't as watered down, the lack of vanilla. It was a more honest, and I think I kind of got that, and it kind of became my benchmark for how we wanted to make chocolate. Was I don't have anything against commercial chocolate per se or industrial chocolate. If they do it really well, hats off to them. We need to do it better. So he kind of started what I saw Bean to Bar as, and all the other stuff kind of came later on.
And before you sort of delved into making it yourself, did you, at that point, were you seeking out other bean to bar makers, you know, getting an idea of what they do, trying their chocolate, or did you just sort of dive into it, buy the beans and start testing it?
I think it was a bit of both, because you couldn't really So there were no bean to bar makers in Sweden at the time. I don't think there were any small French ones apart from your usual suspects that have been around a long time.
Yeah.
The bean to bar market in Europe at the time wasn't very big. I think we had so the chocolate tree, Duffy's.
Right.
Don't remember what year Pump Street started. Omnom started about the same time I did. So that was, everything felt a little bit early on. So you really could only get the American guys. So you had likes of Dandelion and stuff like that. But Dick Taylor.
Funny when you talk about
so I didn't get to try a lot.
When you mention about the years of when you started and all that, it just shows how new this really is. We're not even talking about the 90s, it's the 2000s, and it's still very, very new.
Yeah, and it was a new thing even in the USA, and it was a movement trying to find itself in America. And I'm sitting in a little town up in the middle of Sweden with no access to craft chocolate, and a very different mentality and problem that we have here in Australia. In Sweden, they had access to great French chocolate, great Italian chocolate. And it was more that, why should we pay for your stuff? We've already got good chocolate.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of education. There's a lot of chocolate tastings, chocolate and coffee pairings, chocolate and tea pairings that have been going on since back in the 1990s. Whereas in Australia, we still don't have this. People still don't understand what percentages are. A very different problem.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in Europe, they're definitely more traditional when it comes to how food should be. You know, it's regional as well, but also that idea that we have Michel Clouseau, we have Valrhona, this is the best. Why try and seek out anything better? How can you have something better? So it is interesting that the hurdles in Europe are definitely different than Australia. And so because you started in Sweden, you know, obviously the market was a little bit different, but in general, what were some challenges that you faced just as a chocolate maker yourself? You mentioned that you grew up in a small area where you had to create things that you didn't have. So that I'm sure that helped a lot. But what are some challenges that you faced? Some things that you didn't even anticipate making chocolate, like I had no idea I had to do this or anything like that. And are there other challenges today that are sort of really annoying that are sort of new challenges, or are they the same challenges kind of still that you're facing after all these years?
Yeah, so obviously back then, cocoa beans was probably problem number one for anyone that was around at the time. There were no small suppliers of cocoa. And again, this comes back to even people like Alan McClure, that the only cocoa suppliers in Europe at the time were in the Netherlands, and they were huge companies. So even if you got hold of them, you were looking in the multiples of tons to even get some cocoa to do experiments with. It was a nightmare. Today, you know, you can throw a rock and hit someone who's selling someone's cocoa.
Yep.
They're just everywhere. And the prices are, you know, sensible.
And you can buy
it was only
like
thanks
5
to
kilo bags or something like that too.
Yeah. So it was Bertil Åkesson, who most of the American guys were using and still are using. It's why the Madagascan origin was so dominant in the market back then. He was the only guy that I reached out to that said, yeah, I'll sell you whatever you want. I don't care. You know, it's so he helped us to get our foot in the door. And that's why our first origins were also Åkesson's Madagascar. We also used his Brazilian beans a couple of years after that. That was a huge hurdle. And it took probably 2 years of researching and digging around to get on top of that. Whereas today you can just jump on the internet and buy cocoa from anywhere. And I think chocolate alchemy had just kind of started in the USA somewhere around then too. Machines, of course, were a nightmare. Still are. We're still renovating machines till today. So 11 years on, we're still fixing machines. People talk about the DIY and that kind of stuff in chocolate making. You know, people will put together a PVC winnower and stuff, but that's a whole different ballgame from building conchas from scratch. You know, we've got longitudinal conchas that we build. We've got a roll mill, 3-roll wheel that we just down and rebuilt from scratch.
Wow.
It's a huge job. But sometimes the lack of money is a motivator to put in the hours and, renovate or build something special. Those are two of the bigger problems that they say they remain a problem, even as you scale up. There's a lot of new equipment on the market these days, but it doesn't necessarily do what we want to do. I find that a lot of stuff tries to shoehorn people into a style, or, here's a machine, you need to use it like this. And it kind of standardizes the process. And
that's a good point
that's
too,
why we got away from
the whole fine chocolate industry, craft chocolate, whatever you want to call it. It's sort of like your artisan local bakeries and cheesemakers around the world, where, different regions, different specific shops have their own style. And you're starting to see that in some ways with the bean to bar chocolate. Different regions, different makers definitely have their own style. But then, like you said as well, there's also these sort of trends that a lot of people latch on to, maybe because they don't really know what else to do. And so sometimes you see a lot of repetition out there, which in some ways can get a bit boring.
Yeah,
in regards,
it can come through the education process also.
Yeah. In regards to your chocolate, so how did people, you touched on it a little bit, but how did people in Sweden receive your chocolate early on? Who were the ones that were sort of excited about it? What were some positive, negative feedback you received from people? And also, it's really interesting that you picked up and went to Australia. So you have two completely different demographics now, with very different perceptions on food and chocolate. And so did you have to relearn how to market to the Australian people? Was there some things that resonated in the same way with both countries, and what things were completely different? I mean, you mentioned the percentages and whatnot, but even just their expectations of what it should taste like or what it should feel like in the mouth, were there some major differences there?
Yeah, I think naively, I believe that the markets would be completely different and things would be, I guess, somehow easier here. It certainly wasn't. Sweden was different in that, as I said, chocolate tastings had been around a long time, and everyone had gone on these courses where 70% had been rammed down everybody's throats. So 70% and above is real chocolate. Everything under is it's going to kill you. It's got 1% too much sugar. It's no good. Demori is incredible. Armadale is incredible. Cluzel is incredible. Everything else is inferior. When you bring a new product to market, people think that it's not as good as the stuff they've been told is good. I think when you kind of push too hard in that direction, defining what is the best, as people do, then you create damage also. And it was really hard to break through that and say, yeah, but and we say this today also, we don't want you to buy our chocolate just because we're local, just because we're Swedish, just because we're Australian. We want you to buy it because we think we wouldn't show it to you if we didn't think it was worthy of eating. And breaking through that is incredibly hard. And that's built on many years of people educating and showing people what the best in the world is. And yet we're constantly making sure we don't use that kind of language. What is
that's an interesting
the best
point.
of anything?
That's a very interesting point. That kind of goes against traditional business marketing, to say something like that you don't want a customer who's there just because you're local. And that's kind of how I feel about my tastings. Is I don't want people coming here just because they want to support me locally, or maybe it's a friend of a friend or family, like I want to come because I want to support I want people to be here because they appreciate this and they want to learn. And that's completely opposite of what business would have you dictate to do. So that's a very interesting point that you have that in mind.
And it's something we keep hitting a wall with, is that if we were talking about fine wine or anything like that, it's okay to say that something is not quite there yet. Good on you for giving it a go. This is a decent product. It's not quite there yet. It's not sitting up there with some of the best of whatever I've drank. And you can rank stuff by price. You can rank it by quality of production. You can do all of these things. Yet the constant problem we have, no matter whether it's Sweden or Australia or selling to the rest of the world, is people pigeonholing chocolate as a price point. That all chocolate should be relatively the same price, no matter where it comes from in the world or how it got there. And the origins and the story and the process have all kind of been lost during the advertising of craft chocolate over the years. That it's what I see today is it's still about branding. It's about, which brand is the most popular? Why are they the most popular? Are they trendy? Are they hip? Are they cocoa origins? They're using hip and trendy. We've been turned down by many a retailer over the years because we don't use Peruvian cocoa or whatever's hip and trendy at the time. We don't do that. We try to blaze our own trail and work with something that we like to work with, and there's a resistance to that even in the craft chocolate industry.
Yeah,
and that's disappointing.
It's kind of, yeah, that's definitely disappointing and sad to me as well, that I've seen over the last few years as it gets a lot of traction, especially on social media. Like, why do you see the same brands pushed over and over? You know, these new people who are gung-ho, who basically just imitate what they see. And, from my perspective, I think, you have to, if you're into fine foods, if you're into fine chocolate, you have to have the discernment to be able to say, this is really good because of these criteria, this is not so great. And you shouldn't be afraid to say that. But it seems like, again, like you said, the branding is very important. The origins, it has to be Venezuela, there has to be this. And, you have these brands out there that, to be honest, are just mediocre, they're just okay. And they get so much publicity because the branding is really good. Maybe the price point, the wholesale price point is better, whatever it is. And, it's saddening to see, because some of the people who promote this sort of thing they're all about loving craft chocolate, loving fine chocolate, supporting makers, but they don't have the discernment to really pick out the ones who are really good, and they're afraid to say that. So it's interesting that you say. I'm sure a lot of makers feel that way as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of layers to that, and journalists, they don't always have the time they need to write the article I think they want to write. And when it comes to something really complex like craft chocolate, which is, I think, on the surface, they get given an article that they're supposed to write about this thing called craft chocolate. They think it's going to be a walk in the park. I'll just write this article about chocolate, and they pull the lid off of it and then realize that it's a far bigger, far more complex story than they've got time, money. Go back to your boss and say, I'd love to do a big piece on this. And they said, no, you've got 3 paragraphs to happen. What's the best chocolate in the world?
Exactly. And how does it tie into Christmas and Easter and all that sort of stuff? It's always sort of gimmicky.
Yeah. Tell us a story about the local Willy Wonka, local chocolate. Yeah, it just does my head in, and it hasn't changed. It's the same problem again and again and again. And and this is, honestly, is for us, is our biggest ongoing issue, is just, it's one thing getting the word out there, but it's controlling the narrative that is so hard.
I appreciate your bluntness and your honesty in that, because I think a lot of makers feel that way, and they're not, it's not always pleasant to talk about that sort of stuff, but it's definitely true. I mean, a lot of makers.
There's another thing with that too, man, when it comes to honesty, is that I think a lot of chocolate makers will tell you how hard it is and how difficult stuff is, but it's not as easy still as they're saying it is. This industry is brutal, and there's a lot of businesses right now that are failing, and there's a lot that are going nowhere, and social media doesn't allow for you to talk about that. You can't kind of take to Instagram and say, look, this business sucks. This is really hard. We're having a lot of trouble right now. Please come and buy our stuff. You can't do that. So there's a kind of distorted lens over craft chocolate that kind of paints this picture of people standing around having fun making chocolate, and It's just a brutal industry, and that's not being told either.
Yeah.
And when it is being told, it's not really accurate. It's not really right. So there's a lot of layers to that onion.
Yeah, for me, when I got into fine chocolate, it was around 2007, 2008. I assumed that I just assumed that there's a lot of educated people out there. There's a lot of people that know more than me. But as I delved into it, I was like, wow, I'm really like, even the places that would hand out certificates to people or this and that, it's like nobody really understands the research behind it, what's actually going on.
No.
It's so new. It's so new. And it's funny because now, I'm like 15 years into it, and I feel like I just started yesterday. When I talk to people and how little people know and how little people understand, and even people who have been into it for years, other seasoned chocolate eaters and sommeliers, it's so new. It's so new. So it is frustrating, but it just goes to show that you must be doing this for out of passion, because there's, like you said, there's a lot of hurdles, and you're still going at it, which is amazing. And I think it's good because you're doing a really great job. And one thing I want to talk about too is you don't have on your bars I don't know if you did at some point or you don't, but you don't have the suggested flavor notes kind of right in the center, like nice and big. And even on your website, some of the bars don't have that. And so I wanted to talk about that. Is that something you do on purpose? Do you not want to have those there? What is your reasoning for that?
I personally just don't like it.
Why? What's wrong with
I
it?
think, again, if we were talking about a bottle, I don't like the suggestion that people should taste something. And I mean, if I go to a restaurant and order a meal, I know what the meal is. I can picture in my head what I think I'm going to get. And then when it sits down in front of me, the smell, the sight, the taste, that turns into my experience of the meal that I'm eating. And that's a really personal thing. And you can share it with the person across from you, say, hey, you should try this. This is incredible. It tastes like whatever. But I can't see how the waiter explaining to you could get you to buy it. It might actually turn them off. And my worry has always been, if I was to say that, try our Tenerife 67 bar, it has notes of apricot and blah, 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 blah. People will pop it in their mouth. They'll either say, yes, I can taste that, which I don't know if they can. It's a confirmation bias of some kind.
Right.
And on the other hand, they'll go, oh, I can't taste anything. And then they feel stupid. It's so much nicer when we have done tastings to sit down with people and get them to have a conversation about it, especially as a group. What's going on in your mouth? Because my mouth can't taste what their mouth can. And how I perceive things is not the same as they can. So I really don't focus on flavors a whole lot in the process. To me, it's texture, mouthfeel, melt, aftertaste. The journey is really, really important. I think as long as you can steer clear of challenging flavors and off flavors, all that kind of stuff, everything else is up to the person who's consuming it. And I don't think it's any different if you're making wine. Winemakers don't sit down and, squeeze out that flavor of pepper in there or something. It just happens and they run with it. But they craft it well. My job is to make great chocolate.
So if you went to
how to eat it, or
if you went to a wine shop, or you went to buy beans of different origins, coffee beans of different origins to make coffee, you're saying that that whole idea of putting the flavor suggestions doesn't really work for you? Is that what you're saying? So like if you went to a restaurant and you had all these wines, you're choosing according to where it was made, or what? Like, how would you base your criteria if the flavor suggestions aren't there?
I think there's people that are really fussy. They'll only drink, say, a certain style of wine. They'll only drink white wine, and not only that, they'll only drink Sauvignon Blanc, and they want it to be sweeter and yada, yada, yada. You get those kind of people. For me, I will literally eat and drink anything, and I'm not fussy. People think I'm fussy. I'm not fussy. if I feel like a Pinot Noir and they've got 5 on the menu, I'll just pick one that maybe I haven't tried before, sounds interesting, comes from an area I might not have had it before, and I'll just give it a go. And then it's about the experience. Once it's in the glass, I'll drink it, smell it, taste it, and then put it in my mind, you know, that Pinot Noir from that place in California tastes like such and such. I really like it. Done.
Interesting. No, that's very.
For me, it's that simple. And so
that's not something you hear a lot of people say. A lot of chocolate makers, chocolate people who are into fine chocolate or fine food. You don't hear that that viewpoint very much. So you're definitely out there as far as that goes. But for me, that's a big challenge too, because
I think it's
when I do my tastings,
I think it's quite common.
You think it's more common?
I think it's not I don't think it's necessarily trendy or cool to say that you don't believe in tasting notes. I think a lot of people would like to have you believe that they design chocolate to taste a certain way. We can steer the flavor. We can manipulate it. We can push it. We can get rid of flavors, and we can do that stuff. But the flavor is already there. The flavor's in the cocoa. And just like the flavors in the grapes, you can't make great wine with crap grapes, you know. So if you've got great grapes, you know, you're halfway there already.
Right.
And I think we'd be doing a disservice to the cocoa farmers if we kind of said that we are responsible for how the chocolate tastes. We're responsible for the texture. We're responsible for sending it out the door. If you're not happy with the batch, it should never be sold. We can control all that stuff, but the flavor started with the cocoa farm, and we can only steer that by either buying or not buying those beans. And
wow, that's such an interesting view. You don't hear people say that very much. That, you know, the flavor, obviously the flavor matters. You wouldn't sell something you don't like, but at the end of the day, for you especially, and you notice that in your chocolate, the texture is very, very important as well. And that kind of, you know, because we talk about flavor wheels and flavor suggestions for coffee and wine and other things like that. But to be honest, the research behind flavor and how humans perceive flavor is very limited, is still also very new. And there's so much that's misunderstood. Yeah. There's so much that's not known. And so the way you're talking sounds like someone maybe who has done their research, or you're just maybe a bit more observant of the world. So it's very interesting because a lot of people just go on these trends, and a lot of people come to me frustrated or offended that they don't taste exactly what they're supposed to taste. And that's not how flavor works. So it's nice to hear that from you, another chocolate maker, because, you know, you're talking about the cocoa bean, which is definitely a big part of it. The genetics is huge. The bean itself and how it was grown is a big part of it. But how we as humans perceive flavor is very unique. We have different receptors in our nose. We have different receptors in our mouth. Flavors combined with memory. We have different memories and reference points because we all smell and eat different things. So that's true in that it's impossible to suggest flavors that everyone's going to connect with. It's much more unique. I think the important part is teaching people how to discover that flavor for themselves, you know? So that's very nice to hear.
Sometimes you got to pull it back a little bit also. And it's remembering that we're talking to the general population, and people's vocabulary for flavors is nowhere near as big as you would probably like it to be. You know, people can pick salty, they can pick caramel, they can pick these kind of chunks, like these big flavors. So we try to stick around that. The old school milk is a good example of that. That was designed for my mum, of all people, because she had a hard time getting into craft chocolate. She just couldn't, and I understand that. You know,
did she like chocolate in general before?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, but Cadbury, you know, Cadbury, and so okay, what if I make you what Cadbury's supposed to taste like? You know, what if if I can show you how Cadbury themselves, if they could get back in a time machine and ate their own chocolate 100 years ago, it would blow their mind. And that's what old school milk is. It's to make that creamy, like not creamy in the sense of being fatty or greasy, but it just goes everywhere in your mouth. Like you can't hide from it. It's just caramel and cocoa and fresh milk. And without all the sweetness.
For me, I get a lot
and
of
yeah, there's not a lot of cocoa flavor.
For me, yeah, there's not a lot of cocoa. It feels almost like custard, like a caramel custard, a vanilla custard when I'm eating it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You'll give that to some people and it will blow their mind, because it's something you can't just give these people a 80-something% dark chocolate, but something that they know really, really, really well. They know milk chocolate inside out, back to front. They've eaten it since they've been a kid. If you can succeed in putting a milk chocolate in their mouth that blows their mind, you've won them.
Yeah.
And it always baffled me, the obsession with, like, obviously we make dark chocolate, and dark chocolate is great. You have to accept that there's a certain percentage of the population that will never get there.
Well, it's like I like to compare dark chocolate to black coffee and espresso, right? There's people that appreciate that. There's cultures that they're all about the espresso, for instance, and they appreciate that flavor of the bean. But most people nowadays, especially in places like Australia, Canada, United States, want their lattes and cappuccinos, right? Which is basically espresso with milk, whether you have sugar or not. And if you have a good coffee bean, you could still have a very interesting, beautiful latte cappuccino that holds those flavors. And so definitely milk chocolate is something that even in the craft world has gotten a bad rap, but it is sort of a gateway chocolate to get most consumers sort of into fine chocolate, to appreciate it. Like that old school milk is sort of like looking at something with glasses, like everything was okay. You can kind of see things, you can kind of taste things, it's kind of there, sweet, whatever. But then you have that and it's so vibrant, you're getting all these flavor notes. It's like putting on a pair of glasses after having bad eyesight and like, wow, there's so much more there. Nothing was added, no vanilla, nothing like that.
We'll still get people that will come in and try that particular chocolate and just straight up tell us that it's too bitter.
Really? The old school milk?
Constantly, and wow. It will constantly bring you back to reality where you go, wow, people have really sweet palates.
Yeah.
Like it's sweet enough. It's no sweeter than I want it to be. And we literally were playing around with that recipe, pulling out fractions of sugar to work out how far back we could go until we went too far and it just tasted flat. So we went back again. That surprises me constantly, that there's no getting around that. And to add to your coffee analogy, for me, I love espresso, but I will not buy an espresso from someone who can't make a good espresso.
Yeah.
And I often tell people, especially when we're talking about things like the 100%, if you've had a great espresso in your life, you'll remember it forever. And from that point, you'll be able to identify a bad one and you'll be able to just say, that was a bad espresso. Whereas for most people, it's I hate espresso, it's bitter and disgusting. You haven't had a good espresso.
Right.
And that's really, and when you tell people you've never eaten real chocolate before, sometimes it doesn't go down very well. But it's the truth that if you've never had a great piece of blue cheese, you've never had blue cheese.
Well, that's another analogy I use
that people are
is the cheese. Even most people in the world, whether it's North America, Australia, even places in Asia now, like Korea, cheese to them is mozzarella and cheddar, mozzarella and cheddar, mozzarella and cheddar. And that's all they have. And they have something like blue cheese or pecorino or Idiazabal from Spain or brie. And they're like, the texture is totally different. The flavor is totally different. This is not cheese. It is very much cheese. Just you've never tried that before. And so that's a very good point. So many consumers today are concerned about fair trade cacao, fair trade food. So what are your views and opinions on fair trade related cacao and chocolate? And how does that build into your business model?
I would think at this point I'd have a better answer for this, but I don't.
That's okay.
I guess we all, and I think the consumer also loves the idea of what we think fair trade represents. And in an ideal world where companies did what they said, it would be a perfect thing and it would be great. As it is, I just think it's bullshit. It's for me, it means nothing. It's worthless.
Okay.
When it comes to organic, is a different discussion, which I guess we'll have in a minute. I wish that fair trade was a legitimate thing, but more so, I wish that people just did the right thing. I think it's sad that we've got a world where we have to come up with laws and rules and regulations to try to force companies to do the bare minimum, when the bare minimum is not what they themselves want. Well, to be fair, like the likes of Cadbury do the bare minimum when they make a product. They're not promising you a great bar of chocolate. They've never said they make good chocolate. So they're not necessarily lying. But it blows my mind that average, or there's a word for this in Swedish called lagom, which means, it's not terrible and it's not bad. It's just kind of pedestrian, I think you'd say in America. It's just meh. And that's fair trade too. It's an attempt at pandering to a demographic to get more sales. And
there's definitely that. Yeah.
The people that support it, they want to believe that it's making a change and there's big things happening. And there's been blips of change, and I don't think it's anywhere near enough. It's not enough effort. It's not enough money.
Well, what do you tell your customers when they come in? Is this chocolate fair trade? I'm looking for fair trade chocolate. Is it connected to slave labor? Things like that. What do you say?
Yeah. So obviously, since we moved to Australia, especially, we're doing more or less direct trade. So we're only working with Indonesia and the Solomon Islands. A lot of it simply comes down to logistics, carbon miles, a kind of underappreciated region. I think there's a lot of stereotypes with Solomon Island cocoa. You see it on craft chocolate. We've seen it in chocolate competitions where the cocoa is seen as being inferior. Retailers, as we've said, we've had American retailers that won't stock our products because we use what they think is inferior cocoa without even trying the chocolate. So origin, provenance is still apparently more important than fair trade anyway. It makes no sense for us to kind of go there. Some of our cocos are certified organic. They're usually certified by an NGO or a third party who will come from Australia or New Zealand and help a farm to get certified. But the same story remains, that your average cocoa farmer can't afford it. It excludes good origins. And that's something I have a huge issue with, is that there's some great cocoa out there in the world. There's a lot of great cocoa, more than we can use. Yeah. To exclude these farms because of certifications, I just can't deal with that. Yeah, and to only buy from farms that are certified is not right either.
No. Yeah, especially if you're a chocolate maker, for instance, who goes somewhere, you go to a country and you just, talk to the locals. Hey, do you know anyone who grows some really good cacao? Yeah, this guy does. He's not certified. You bring however much you can back, you make some batches with it. That's ideal. A farmer selling directly to a maker and negotiating a price that they both agree on. That's the ideal situation. And to put sort of these things in place that deter that sort of relationship, that business arrangement, is very sad, very, I don't know, discouraging, unfortunately.
Well, and you have the same risk. The same thing has happened, as I explained at the very beginning, about education. If we educate the public that only buying fair trade is the correct way to buy chocolate, then the big companies win. Yeah. They can do all of that better than we can, and they don't have to mean it. They don't have to be sincere. And we've got now, I don't know what the market is like over there, but Cadbury Australia has 100% sustainable cacao written on all of their products, all of their marketing. And it's greenwashing. And we know that. But to the average customer, they just go, oh, well, what's wrong with Cadbury? They're sustainable. They take it at face value. So if we entered that market, we're taking them on head first, and you can't do that. I still insist that the one thing we've got over any of those guys is transparency and quality. And in the sense of, the mineral content of our chocolate or health benefits. It's just the pure quality of manufacturing, the time and the effort and the care that is put into making the product, like good cheese, like good wine. We're splitting hairs, you're talking about 10% difference, not 100% difference. And you need to educate people on that identifying quality in things, because when you do that, you can taste the mold in a lot of chocolate if you just leave it in your mouth long enough. And people never spend that much time on it. So if we went into the whole fair trade, organic, we're competing with companies that don't have to buy cocoa. They don't have to know where the cocoa comes from, and the chocolate doesn't have to be good. And that's a problem for me. Which comes to organic, for example, to have a product certified as organic in Australia has to contain 95% or above organic ingredients. We use Queensland sugar, which comes from up north. To get certified, we'd have to start using organic certified sugar. And most of this certified organic cane sugar on the market comes from South America. So I can't get my head around why buying sugar from South America and having it shipped all the way across the ocean to Australia is better for the environment than us buying sugar from up the road.
Yeah.
But again, people don't want to talk about that. We went through this in Sweden because we were using beet sugar, which was farmed in Sweden and made in Sweden.
You're too logical.
And I've had arguments. I've had arguments with people insisting that we need to buy cane sugar. Cane sugar does not grow in Europe. It grows in South America, it grows here in Australia. And people have an obsession with cane sugar, that cane sugar is somehow better quality or better for you. But when you lay out what I think is logical, that, getting it to Sweden is a logistical nightmare for sugar, makes no sense. But here we are anyway, it's still an ongoing issue. People don't really understand how anything thrives on their shelf.
I think it's a lot of chocolate makers, when you talk to them like this one-on-one, they make some very valid points, things that are educational that the public should know. And, I don't know that anyone who looked at your website or purchased your bars would hear this story about the sugar that you're buying in a way, like local Australian sugar versus getting it shipped in and all that sort of stuff. So, in a way, I feel like it's important for makers like you and whatnot to kind of put those stories out there, even on your website, because I think it would resonate with a lot of people.
We know that wording these things in a delicate way is incredibly important. I'm not, I don't speak in the right way to kind of get the point across in a way that the general public would receive it well. Plus, you also need to back that. It needs to be written in more places. We don't have any chocolate journalists in this country at all. We have no one kind of on our side writing good articles about facts. And if they are, they're done in a very vague, loose way that basically says that buy craft chocolate, it's all incredible. And then people can go buy something that will turn them off craft chocolate for the rest of their life. So there's so much work to be done, not only from our side, but everybody's side, to try to make this work. And we're just scratching the surface on it.
Let's also touch on that. A lot of people who are drawn to fine chocolate are people who tend to be conscious about their food, nutrition, health benefits, things like that. A lot of the chocolate is dark chocolate, antioxidants, that sort of thing. So what are your views or opinions in regards to the nutritional aspects of chocolate? And is that something you talk about with your customers?
Yeah. Again, the Australian market kind of changed my view on that. I think one thing we do have an issue with here in Australia is a lot of liquor to bar or contract manufactured chocolate. So the health food stores here are full of many brands of
as soon as you said health food
organic
chocolate, my stomach just was like
Yep, I know. And so most of it is made there's very few companies bringing any kind of cocoa anything into this country. but there's a couple of suppliers bringing in liquor, and it is Peruvian liquor that is Criollo, organic, fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, you name it, and it is horrible. It is, it tastes of mold. So green grassy mold is what it tastes of, and this stuff goes to most of the contract manufacturing places. So the health food aisles in the supermarket, all of the health food stores are full of these brands that are apparently better for you and promise to do better for the world. And the people that consume those products, they do it believing that it's healthier for them and it's healthier for the planet, and you will not change their mind. And I think we, again, like I said about the environmental stuff, if we go down that path, we start playing into their marketing, and it's something that they're much better at, because they can lie to you without laughing, and I can't, I just can't lie to people. It's so when people ask about the health benefits of cocoa and stuff, you lay out what cocoa can be beneficial for, but it's not a superfood. I think unless you're eating the 100% stuff, you're not really going to see any major. And we'll come people that come in and buy 14 bars of 100% as soon as it's back on the shelf. Those people get that. But we also have people that just straight up won't eat chocolate because of the sugar content. That if we made a sugar-free chocolate, not sugar-free as in 100%, but sugar-free as in stevia and all the other wonderful things, but have it be as sweet as Cadbury Dairy Milk, then they would buy it for their health benefits. Whereas in Sweden, it was a different problem. People were talking about antioxidants and polyphenols, and here in Australia, it's not. It's usually sugar. Sugar's the bad guy. So
interesting.
At the moment, the obsession is sugar-free chocolate, and we're not going there. We've tried. We've experimented around with sweeteners and that stuff, and I don't like it.
Yeah, they can really ruin the flavor of the bean, of the chocolate, a lot of these sugar alcohols.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned about the 100% and whatnot. And, it's hard to always discern, because there's a lot of research that backs up a lot of the health benefits. It's not all completely conclusive, but, there's a lot of good suggestions out there as far as what has been discovered. But it's hard to know who's backing it up, who's pushing it, who's funding it. And but there is some research that suggests that, just moderate amount of, 65, 75% dark chocolate on a regular basis can have positive influences on, cardiovascular health, memory, things like that. But like you said, it's not a superfood. Personally, I don't really believe in a lot of superfoods. A lot of foods have certain nutrients more than others. But I think a lot of people get scared about, it's a little like, if you have 2 pieces of 70% dark chocolate, yeah, there's 30% sugar, but that's not a lot considering you're only eating, a few pieces a day, which is sort of how you're supposed to consume fine chocolate. You're not supposed to eat like a bar of Metiisto is not a serving of chocolate for the day, right? Not really supposed to be. And so
that's why it's square. It fits on a piece of toast. Yeah, but we explain the same thing, that to those people, you can eat a bar of, say, again, old school milk, which is the sweetest of the milk chocolates we make. If you eat that whole bar, which is a 75-gram bar, I think you've got about 2 tablespoons of sugar, something like that. It's not a huge amount. The problem is when you go buy a bar of milk chocolate from the supermarket, it's about 56% sugar, some of the Cadbury stuff. And it's a 200-gram bar, and people will eat a 200-gram bar in one sitting, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
you're consuming 110 grams of sugar in a sitting. So even eating Cadbury in moderation isn't bad for you. So it's all about how much you eat. And surprise, surprise, that we're still having that same discussion. Moderate the amount of stuff you eat. And I think, again, it's like the red wine argument. I've been hearing about this ever since I can remember, that red wine is good for you, red wine is bad for you, red wine in moderation, and it just goes back and forth, back and forth. And
but I think,
it's the good outweighs the bad outweighs the good if you enjoy a glass of wine, I think if it brings you any kind of joy, if it makes your brain work because you're tasting things and stuff, it can only be beneficial that you're, it's like meditation for some people, that they can
Food is
meditate on a
not
glass
just
of wine.
fuel. Food is not just fuel. Food is,
Exactly.
It's like going on vacation or going to an art gallery. It's hitting those dopamines. It's the mental health and mental pleasure that food brings as well, hand in hand.
Yep. Going on a Ferris wheel, or it's, to me, it's more than just the food. And I think when you reduce food down to health benefits and fuel, that's why we've got a health food market. That's why we've got health food stores selling health food stuff.
Which is essentially sort of like all cod liver oil chocolate, right? It's like, it's bad, but it's good for you, so you have to enjoy it.
Yep. And I think a lot of those people are, I don't want to say naive, but they just don't know any better.
Right.
They're doing what they think they are doing that is right for the planet, for themselves, and it's just not. And
that's what's
there's a weird.
That's what's so wonderful about fine chocolate, like your chocolate bars, especially your dark chocolate bars or whatever, is that you're getting it all. You're getting the beautiful flavor, satisfaction mentally, when you're eating it. And you're also getting the nutrition, your dark chocolate bars, your high percentage dark milks, don't have a lot of sugar. You have the same minerals and antioxidants. If anything, a lot of fine chocolate makers, one thing you probably know, as everyone knows, is that you don't burn your cocoa beans, right? You don't over roast them. You don't roast them as hard as coffee beans. And so because of that, which is different than commercial chocolate, in some ways, I don't have evidence for this, but it could be more beneficial because the roasting, the heating isn't killing all the antioxidants, the polyphenols that commercial chocolate has. So, with fine chocolate, you get the best of both worlds. You get healthy chocolate, good ingredients, and beautiful flavor. You got it all. And I wish more consumers knew that.
Yeah, and I think you run the risk of, like many of the things we talked about, of overeducating people or undereducating them, where you basically present them with a superior product that is raw, vegan, organic, fair trade chocolate that is gritty, sandy, tastes horrible, full of all kinds of weird things. And in their mind, that's what chocolate is supposed to taste like, because that's how the Aztecs did it. So they'll eat that, and if they were to come and eat our chocolate off the back of that, they go, "Oh, your chocolate's too processed. It tastes commercial." So then all of a sudden we're bad guys. And you end up standing there saying, "But we're transparent. We tell you where our cocoa comes from. I can show you the whole process," and they'll fight you on it. So the marketing is powerful on all sides. And if you're following some guy on Instagram who's, I've met people that believe that cocoa will cure cancer and all kinds of stuff. And I find it disturbing. It's a weird one. I just want people to eat good chocolate and process it in their own way, enjoy it mentally in the mouth, just experience chocolate for what it is, not for what you want it to be, and know that it's something that has been done right, that it's been manufactured properly, it's been manufactured with care, that you've done what you can to get the best ingredients. You haven't put anything in there, you're not hiding anything. Honesty and transparency. But I think that's a hard thing to market.
It is. It's very hard, but hopefully more people will start to look at that, start to understand it. We got a long road ahead as far as that concerned.
Maybe.
So
quality is like that too, that everyone says that their product is good quality, but quality is subjective. So.
Yeah, everyone has the highest quality ingredients, everyone in the world. I've never been to any restaurant or anything that doesn't use the best quality ingredients. So
straight out of the freezer.
From a craftsmanship point of view, as a chocolate maker, how do you decide on, I guess we kind of covered this, but like, how do you decide on which cacao beans to use? I mean, you said you want to use sort of locally, not locally, but closer to Australia, Solomon Islands, Indonesia, things like that. But how do you decide on the beans that you use? Do you want to share any criteria in regards to what you believe should be the final flavor of your chocolate bars? How do you decide this is good, this is not good?
Oh, so I think I touched on at the very beginning that I think eating chocolate should be a bit of a roller coaster ride. That I don't really like it when you pop chocolate in your mouth and you just get smacked in the side of the head with 50 different flavors at once and you can't work out what's going on. You need cocos that offer something unique, something special. If we've currently got a chocolate in our range that already does something similar, then I don't see any reason to do it. So I'm trying to find something that's unique in its own way, because you need it to be different. If we're going to have 70% dark chocolates on the shelf, the average person needs to be able to pop that in their mouth and experience something different. And again, cocoa is more than just flavor. Some chocolates will they will feel different in your mouth. And for no real reason that I can understand, apart from, the terroir, the quality of the fat that is in that cocoa changes the way it melts in your mouth, which changes the way you taste things. So hunting around and trying to find something that is just different. And we've got the added bonus of being down this area of smoke-dried cocoa, which is a constant challenge of weeding out smoke-dried cocoa. We only want sun-dried cocoa. And we still get bags of smoke-dried stuff turn up in the middle of our shipments. So farmers will still throw smoke-dried cocoa in there that they got from some bloke up the street to bulk out the order, thinking that we won't care, and we do. So we definitely don't want that.
And for those who don't really understand the difference, why do you not want smoke-dried cacao? For those who don't know what that means.
Obviously sun-dried cocoa is dried in the sun. In the Pacific Islands, because of the moisture, they have to build solar huts where they'll put the cocoa out on beds it's like a greenhouse made of plastic, and move air through it, and that the heat from the sun and the evacuation of the moisture from the fan will dry the cocoa. But traditionally, all of the areas around here smoke-dried their cocoa by putting in a drum over a fire, and it taints the cocoa with like a peaty, smoky taste. And while that sounds probably enticing to some people, it basically kills any other flavor in there. It overpowers everything. And to me, it's just not appealing. And it's for the bulk market. The bulk market doesn't care.
Right.
So in evolving industries like the Pacific Islands, it's difficult getting these people to sun-dry stuff they want an instant return. That if we're going to make sun-dried stuff, here's the investment. We want you to buy 50 tons. And you go, okay, but we can't, So it's a backwards and forwards painful process of building the anticipation up with farmers, telling them that, look, if you make great cocoa, we can make great chocolate out of it. And there's this thing called the craft chocolate industry, but then the sales are not there.
Yeah.
So then they get deflated and they go sell this beautiful sun-dried cocoa to China to make into cocoa butter for cosmetics. So it's a constantly up and down thing for all of us, that it's just we wish that this industry kicked off and that we could support the farmers that are doing the right thing. On the other hand, we have farmers that let us down, that are supposed to supply a certain quality, and they have a bad harvest and they don't say so.
Yeah,
they just kind of slip some other stuff in there hoping you won't notice. And trust goes both ways. So relationships are important, finding farmers that we trust, that are consistent in quality. And if you're your average chocolate maker in Europe or USA and you buy from a broker, which there's many of these days, you just simply call up that broker and say, hey, send me what's new, oh, we've got this Vietnamese cocoa from such and such, and then you receive it in your factory and you here's this Vietnamese cocoa we've sourced, and you didn't have to go through all of that stuff. And if the broker receives a bad shipment, you never hear about it.
Right.
So it's such a different way of doing things over here than it is as when we're in Europe, where we could call a broker and have 10 origins delivered from 10 different corners of the world on a pallet. We can't do that. That's why we don't offer, 15 different origins. It's just not possible.
Okay.
So yeah, relationships, quality, consistency. We don't have massive criteria, but we're looking for something interesting and different that will fit in with what we currently make without being radically different.
And
if that answers the question.
Yeah. And another, before we just end it here, one last question is, are there any results in the kitchen over the years when you started off and even today that surprised you? Anything memorable, sort of, as a chocolate maker, learning as you go? Was there something that I thought, I didn't expect this, or this was a disaster, or this was better than I thought? Anything like that?
I think that just constantly happens. I think sometimes a new bar, like the raspberry licorice bar, I think was about 18 months worth of, you come up with this idea that you think is going to be an amazing idea, and then you put it into practice and you go, it's not what I wanted. So we don't use it, and you come back again and again and again and again until you get something that you feel like you're onto something, and then you keep going with that, or you don't, you bail on it. And I think we try not to sell our experiments. We don't want to sell things that we're not happy with. We don't just throw things out there and just random.
Because you mentioned 18 months to develop something you're happy with, when in the way the food industry works, especially working as a chocolatier for many years and seeing the bean to bar makers now, it's like every few months they're pushing out seasonal product, a new product. And I get that, I understand that, but it forces people to put out products that are just not that great, but people just want something new. So it's interesting that you're not willing to do
that. And I think you end up blurring the line between remelters are a big thing here in Australia. So the majority of the market, chocolate market, is taken up by remelters.
Right, chocolate.
We're just using Barry caliber or I mean, in my mind, a chocolatier is someone who makes bonbons and chocolates and that kind of thing. A lot of these guys they're literally pouring chocolate into a mold and then they sprinkle stuff on the back of it.
Right.
And that's a huge industry here, because if you ask your average person, what do you like? What kind of chocolate do you like? They won't tell you if they like milk chocolate or dark chocolate, or whether they like specific origins or percentages. They'll simply say, I like dark chocolate with peppermint. Do you make a dark chocolate with peppermint? No, we don't. Okay. And then they leave.
Yeah. You don't want to,
because
you don't want to crumble candy canes on top of your beautiful single origin bars.
Yeah, we occasionally do stuff like that for bark and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, the bars themselves are their own thing.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with playing around with chocolate. And I think when we do that kind of thing, we use it as a side product. When it comes to bars, there's something that makes me uneasy about pouring chocolate into a mold and sprinkling something on it and just selling it as a creation. I think that there's a way of doing that over a long period of time. Again, like Patrick Chocolate and stuff, where I kind of got half of my mentality from properly, was a well thought out process of why are we putting these things on there? Can we do it better? And you keep going and going and going. And sadly, I think it's underappreciated. That's why we don't have Patrick Chocolate anymore. I would like to think of it that way. It's just a well thought out reason why. And raspberry licorice started off as a proper idea that was challenging. And when I got it to the point, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I was going for. It took a long time.
So one thing I wanted to ask you is, the raspberry licorice. So licorice, I know I heard is big in Australia, but I know that it's also very big in Sweden. So where did that
Oh
was
yeah,
that sort of a Australian idea or was that a Swedish idea with the licorice?
it's 100% a Swedish idea. So
Okay.
the Swedes don't just like licorice; they're obsessed with licorice. So you get licorice flavored ice cream, licorice flavored chewing gum. They put licorice pie, licorice caramels, licorice everything. They have licorice festivals. Licorice is bigger than chocolate, which is a big deal. Swedes will gladly eat licorice over eating chocolate.
That's so
Not everybody,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
for the most part.
I
So
actually
raspberry licorice is
I actually don't like, I never liked licorice that much. My dad was huge on black licorice. As a kid, I hated it. And even to this day, I'm not usually
yeah,
a huge fan of licorice, but I loved that bar. I felt like it was just right
yeah,
with the chocolate, the licorice, and the raspberry. It just worked for me. And the texture was amazing. I really, really liked it. But unfortunately, in Canada, there's a lot of people, and Canada is a mixture of different cultures all over the world, right? So, and there's a lot of people in the world who just never
yeah.
had licorice, don't understand why people eat it. And so it was a bit hard to sell sometimes. I had my
Yep.
tastings, and some people are like, soy sauce? What is this? I'm like, no, it's licorice. But so it's
Yeah,
interesting. And
and
it's
it's the main thing. Like the raspberry licorice comes from lollies. They have it's a really popular flavor combination. You can buy extra chewing gum that is raspberry and licorice flavored,
hmm,
and the idea is that licorice is a sugar, so real licorice is a sugar. Whereas in Australia, licorice is a flavor. It's a candy. It's aniseed flavored gelatinous rope.
yeah.
That's not licorice.
My
Whereas
nono, who's
Sweden, licorice is real licorice.
my nono who's Sicilian, he would have anise water. Basically, in Italy and Sicily, you could buy these anise flavored syrups or whatnot, and you put it into your water. And so when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I'd see a pitcher of water in the fridge when I went to their house. And I was so thirsty in the summer. I'd pour a big glass and I'd chug it. And I'm like, oh, because all you could taste is licorice. And as a kid, that's not what you wanted in your water.
Yeah, it's like ouzo, the Greek drink.
Mm,
So the licorice is a polarizing flavor, but the raspberry licorice is that you get the tartness. If you use real raspberries, we use Australian freeze-dried raspberries, and they're tart. And the licorice is sweet. So if you get this kind of yin and yang where the raspberry and the licorice play off of each other when it's right, and you get this kind of, and obviously the confectionery companies, it's all chemicals and
right.
stuff, but the idea still remains that can you achieve that? Can you make the raspberry and the licorice play off of each other, having their own fight within a chocolate bar while the chocolate keeps going and the raspberry licorice keeps, and much easier said than done. And until we got it to the point where we're happy with it. And I was so excited when we finally got it and let's take it to market. And all of our retailers across the world, nah, we don't want to buy that. Licorice is, people don't like licorice here in America. People don't like licorice here in New Zealand. And you go, oh, come on, just try it. Like, people might really like it. And it honestly took longer to get that product out there. And now it's got this cult following all over the world where people just
That's
can't.
good.
It's its own thing.
Yeah. I'd like to
And
carry it
since then,
again.
other companies have done raspberry liquid bars.
Oh, really?
Sorry?
I said I'd like to carry it again. I didn't
Yeah.
get it in my last order just because it was a hard sell. And to be honest, I would have just eaten them all myself. So I said I better not get that one. But it's nice to know
I
that
think
there's
we're going through this at the moment with white chocolate. So we finally caved after 11 years. We've never made a white chocolate for market.
yeah.
And we did it and we thought, okay, look, right, we'll do it. We'll put it out there. We meet these people that are passionate about loving white chocolate, allegedly. So we'll make it, we'll get it out there, and we'll see what the response is. And the response was like, yeah, slow. Then the moment you don't have it, where's the white chocolate? It was a slow sell. It's not everyone, I want it. And it just starts developing into this cult following. The creme brulee bar is that. It's just,
Mm.
You create a monster sometimes, and sometimes it comes from the most unlikely of things. I still haven't gotten around. I've been meaning to make a carrot cake bar for 4 years.
Okay.
That I've shot my mouth off about. But it's one of those ideas that I keep revisiting every now and then, and maybe it will come out one day. But you keep these things in the back of your head that you really want to do, and one day it turns into a product. And in the meantime, other people have brought them out anyway. So you go, oh, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, but yeah, long way around. I don't really have any desire to just put a flavoring in, or just the gingerbread bar that we made. We get asked about that constantly, and it was just a pain in the ass to make. It was a nightmare. And it was a dark milk, of Indonesian dark milk with mandarin oil in it, and a Swedish ginger snap, which is called pepparkaka.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 0.5 millimeter thick, and it's perfectly crispy the whole way through. And we made it in the shape of a goat, which is called the julbok. It's a Swedish tradition to have this Christmas goat, and we pushed it into the back of this chocolate bar. It was incredible. It blew my mind, and but it's such a nightmare to make, and people want it. They would buy it every day if we made it, but it's just too hard. And sometimes it sounds like a great idea when you make something, and you might spend a day on it or a couple of days, but when you've got to make multiples of thousands, that you realize very quickly that it's just not viable, not without putting the prices up. And yeah, crazy.
Cool. And I guess you already mentioned it now, but what is your current lineup of bars? So you already mentioned the white. You have the white one. The creme brulee is a new one as well. And you mentioned sort of maybe doing a carrot cake in the future. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
Not really. We released our new barley bar, I think, late last year, which has been well received. We haven't done a whole lot of new bars since late last year. We did put a few out last year. I don't even know what we're working on next. Yes, I've been meaning to do another nib bar forever, but yeah, I think nib bars have been done to death, and
yeah, sometimes they're very boring, but once in a while you find one that works well, that adds something other than just
and I think
texture.
Again, we come back to the same thing, that I think there's a lot of things that are decisions that people make based on what they've seen somewhere else. And it's increasingly hard to be creative and individual when it feels like everything's been done to death. But as I said before, I've seen other raspberry licorice bars come to the market after we've done ours, and they're not the same product. And I don't know if the same care or effort has been put into making it a whole product. So there's always room to do things better. But I've had great nib bars many years ago, and it's kind of hard to reinvent that wheel unless you're truly offering something incredible, which maybe it's possible, but it'd be underappreciated. I like nibs and white chocolate. I think it works great.
I'm not a fan of that.
So
some people have done that. I don't like the white and the nibs.
No?
I don't know. It doesn't work for me. Yeah. I don't hate it, but it's like it doesn't work. Excellent. And
that's where the creme brulee bar came from. It was the the creme brulee is that for that reason, that I think white chocolate needs some texture to play off of, and nibs have been that thing for a while. The creme brulee is obviously for the burnt caramel adds something. It adds a dimension to the white chocolate that's not there. And since they are very thin shards, they kind of explode in your mouth, and it plays off each other really well. So it adds something positive. And again, there's no point putting something in or on a chocolate bar just because you've seen it on Instagram.
Right.
You actually have to do it, eat it, and go, okay, is this adding anything, or is it just for looks? Is it just for a photo? Is it just for marketing? Is it just a gimmick? And I think, that's a really common thing. But, you know, food sells through pictures. Chocolate looks really boring in pictures.
Actually, I wanted to ask you before we end this, since your kids are growing up on all this incredible chocolate, are they picky about chocolate if someone else gives them, Lindt or Cadbury or something, or they just eat anything?
So my oldest, who is 13, she is not a massive fan of sweets at all. Even if I give her chocolate, we gave her a bunch of Easter bunnies. It'll literally take her 6 months to eat it.
Wow.
But she won't eat cheap chocolate. But we don't eat cheap chocolate. Not because I'm a snob and not because we own a chocolate. I just don't like it.
Right.
I think if I ever got out of this industry, I'd probably just wouldn't eat chocolate. I just don't. I enjoy good chocolate as a different product. I see it as I would like chocolate to be, and yet what you buy at the supermarkets is not what the picture is in my head of chocolate. It's like, again, I love wine, I love cheese, but I won't go and buy a $5 bottle of wine just to drink, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, for me as well, when I got into fine chocolate, I was not a big chocolate fan, especially dark chocolate. And I think a lot of people who don't like chocolate can get into craft chocolate because the reason why they don't like chocolate is they don't like what commercial chocolate offers and have no idea what chocolate can taste like. So, same idea there. I wouldn't go back to commercial chocolate because it doesn't satisfy me in any way. There's no point in eating it.
Exactly my point. And some of our most difficult customers that will walk through our doors are the self-confessed chocoholics.
Yeah.
And in my mind, my radar goes off the moment that someone says, I'm a chocoholic, I love chocolate. And I go, okay, well, judging, craft chocolate isn't available here. You can't buy it from a supermarket or a health food store, anything. So if you are a chocoholic, that means you're currently consuming a lot of chocolate, which must be bad chocolate. And since you love it, that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And you've got to try to steer that person and say, well, great that you love chocolate, but here's better chocolate, because they're currently buying stuff they like. And usually the best people are the ones that come in and say, look, I used to like chocolate, or I've had good chocolate in my life, but I don't like the stuff at the supermarkets. I don't like the dark chocolate. Can you help me find something that I can like? And those people, even though on the surface they seem difficult, are the easy ones, because they're looking for something that doesn't currently exist, and you fill a gap in their life. And those people are eternally grateful and become loyal, good customers. For the people that see us as a birthday present or a once a year kind of special treat, they're really hard because they've already got the products they like. And if you like the evaporated coffee that you buy at the supermarket and you drink that every day, you're not going to switch over to being buy special beans and make your coffee fresh every morning kind of person. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and I think the large amount of the population is that, they're not necessarily happy with what they buy at the shops, but the price point is okay, and what they're buying is familiar enough.
Good enough.
It's like McDonald's or anything.
Yeah.
No one. You would not interview anyone on the streets that believes that McDonald's makes a great burger, but they've all eaten it, and they all eat it, and it's a familiar kind of like a hug from a weird uncle, and they're kind of okay with it, and that's good enough. And when you come along and say, but here's a better burger, it's 5 times the price. They don't know how to express it. They don't really want to pay more, and they can't really taste the difference, or don't really care. Or
that's interesting about price too, because for instance, if you're eating, let's say, chocolate that's not very satisfying mentally and flavor wise, you end up eating more of it because you're trying to satisfy your body. You're trying to satisfy yourself. So you keep putting more in your mouth, thinking I'm going to reach that moment, but it never happens with the commercial chocolate. So in some ways, people have to understand that if they do switch to fine foods, fine chocolate, for instance, that they can be, and a lot of people in my tastings say this, they just need a few bites and they feel good. They don't need to keep going because it hit everything that they expected. So, that's definitely a valid point that you're
Yeah.
bringing up. A lot of people think that, but it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think psychology is a big thing in people eating in general, why they eat what they eat. I eat obviously because we need to eat, but I eat for enjoyment too, in the best possible way. That I want to eat things that make me think. I want to eat things that remind me of my childhood. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. Hence the old school milk. To me, if I'm going to eat milk chocolate, I want it to taste like what my 8-year-old self thinks milk chocolate is. That whether it was like that when I was a kid or not is irrelevant. It's that when I was a kid, I loved it. Like that, popping a piece of milk chocolate in your mouth and it kind of just covered your whole mouth and you couldn't get away from it. It was just everywhere. And families would sit around with a big block of chocolate and share it. And you would break off a row of chocolate and you'd pass it around the sofa while you were watching a movie. And that's how we ate chocolate. We didn't have chocolate in the house all the time. And we've lost that and to marketing. Now, when families go shopping for chocolate, the confectionery aisle is full of 20 different kinds of Cadbury with all these different inclusions. And every family member will pick the one that they like the most. And people will sit down and eat a whole bar themselves. That has come so far from when I was a kid. And this is the same companies. So the psychology in how people are eating chocolate has changed dramatically, where it's not about sharing anymore. It's about what I like sharing a pizza or ordering off a pizza for yourself.
That's a good point.
And these become big cultural problems. Yeah, we have massive problems with this in Australia with obesity. It's like, I think
it's also chocolate's also not seen as something very precious, kids 50 years ago, 100 years ago, can I have a piece of chocolate, or whoever, or someone invites you over and they offer you chocolate. It's like, oh, chocolate. Wow. Now it's like, so what? Chocolate's shoved everywhere, all over the place. It's not seen as this mentality of that's kind of child's play. It's children's thing, and it's so available and it's so cheap. It kind of cheapens the whole idea of chocolate for people. It's not seen as very precious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's to me, it's kind of like if you had a dinner party and you went to the fridge and you had 6 people sitting around and each person pulled out their own bottle of wine and just kind of sat there chugging away on their own individual bottle of wine. It would just feel weird that you would open a bottle and you would kind of pour it around and you could have a conversation about it or not. But you would, even if you're not going to talk about it, people still drink wine as a group. And then you'll open a second bottle and a third and a fourth and you'll share it around. It would just seem odd to have people drinking their own bottle of wine at a table. Why can't we do that with chocolate?
Yeah.
And we do get customers that do that.
And we can create that culture, definitely. Just like, for tea culture, like Chinese tea, you have it's sort of a tea ceremony, Japanese tea, and you have people around you and you're sharing the same tea, or even like coffee as well, right? Yep. So I can definitely see, and that's what I try and do. I'm sure that's what many people try and do nowadays, is build that culture of, like you said, sharing it, enjoying it together, having it a discussion point or not, and just enjoying it. We definitely need to get people thinking like that.
I think even when it comes to tea and coffee, we've seen the opposite thing happen, where there's been attempts in the past to try to create that culture within tea and coffee drinking to segregate people into
what flavor do you want
people
today?
that like Darjeeling.
Yeah,
like they did it with the tea boxes. That pick the flavor. What tea would you like? Nespresso tried it with the espresso with the stupid pods, where you create this idea that you can have whatever coffee you want at home. But I don't think it really worked. I don't think it really kicked off, because you make a good pot of coffee and you drink it as a group. You make a good pot of tea and you drink it as a group. So that's really deeply ingrained in tea and coffee drinking, even for the people that don't know that they're doing it. Whereas chocolate's completely the opposite. So we're trying to break away from that and get rid of the Nespresso mentality in chocolate and give it the wine mentality. But it's tough, and it's very, very deeply ingrained in stuff.
Just from this conversation we're having, it shows that you think deeply about things in general, but especially about your chocolate and about food. And you have so many good ideas. I think you should start your own podcast in Australia or something. I think that'd be really cool.
I
You have so much to
spend
say.
spend too much time in my own head, I think.
Yeah, but you have good ideas. You need to get them out there and people
Yeah.
need to hear them. That's good. Awesome. And so I will finish
Yeah,
off
finding
here.
channels,
I will finish off here. What
definitely.
is the best way for people, not just in Australia, but wherever, if they want to learn more about you, if they want to purchase your chocolate, enjoy your chocolate, what is the best way for them to be connected with Metiisto and to connect with your chocolate?
I guess our website's the best place to start, at www.metiistochocolate.com.au. Obviously, our retailers on there. You've got people like yourself. If you want to buy our chocolate and you're in Canada, Instagram's kind of okay. If you've got any questions, shoot us a message. Like, we're very responsive to messages. And if you're into chocolate, I'm always happy to talk about chocolate. Don't be surprised if I don't convince you to make bean to bar chocolate, but you'll only get the truth.
That's a good point. Another chocolate maker mentioned that more people should be making chocolate too. You know, it's not seen so much as a threat, but that I think it will have people will have more of an appreciation of chocolate in general and your chocolate if they sort of get into that, making it themselves.
I think there's probably another whole conversation in that. There's the economies of scale and quality that come with that you need to be of a certain size to buy at a competitive price, make at a certain quality, and make at a certain consistency. And I think it's great that people get into making chocolate like it is that people make beer at home. But going from craft brewing beer at home to being a craft brewer and owning a brewery is two totally different things.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same.
That romanticism, the romanticism around chocolate making kind of distorts reality. That, you know, I get people weekly that will either come in here or send me an email wanting to get into bean to bar, and I tell them the truth that, you know, it's a brutal industry. The niche that you think you've got, or the difference that you think you're pitching, has been done. It's been done to death, and you know, it's not as easy as you think, and the amount of money that you need is way more than you think it is.
But
and
even not
me
becoming chocolate makers to make it or to sell it, but even just, you know, like somebody learning how to make their own bread at home and all of a sudden have an appreciation for really good bread that's well made. Then when they go out there, like,
and
okay,
that's my
now
advice.
I can spend that money on that because I know how much work it is and how hard it is to make.
And that's exactly my advice. Like, do it as a hobby. Like, buy some cocoa beans, they're readily available. Buy a little stone grinder, make chocolate at home, make it for yourself, make it for your family. Appreciate the time and effort that goes into a good bar, but also it should help them to pick out the bad stuff, so you can help the right parts of the industry grow.
Yeah.
And in general, just have a discussion about chocolate.
Yeah.
But everyone's starting bean to bar businesses. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Is there a big enough market? You know, distribution is a nightmare. Tough one. But people should make chocolate. They should make beer. They should make bread.
Exactly.
If only just to appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think that'll just enhance the appreciation. It'll enhance, you know, why, how, you know, the importance of supporting farmers who grow this really good cacao. And just when they go and they try makers like you and others, they just appreciate it so much more because they know the work involved. They know what good chocolate is. So I'm hoping that more people just start making chocolate at home just for fun, just for themselves. I think that's a good way to uplift the craft fine chocolate movement.
I think it also helps people to be more, we need people to be self-critical. Again, I wouldn't have done this at all if we didn't feel like we could make something that should be sold. And we're not all good at everything. You know, there's things I'm not good at. There's things, and maybe for some people, chocolate making isn't really what they're good at. And passion alone won't get you there.
No.
You know, you could want to be a painter as much as you want to. You can go on painting courses. You can buy the best brushes and the best paint. But if you don't have what it takes, you won't be a famous artist.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop you from painting pictures and hanging them on your wall.
Right.
That's just reality, and identifying that is really important. Is this chocolate good truly, and should I try to sell it, or should I just make it for myself?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it stops you using your talents elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. Excellent.
And in that, there's potentially someone who's really good at it. That's the next big thing in chocolate.
Yep.
Who knows?
Yeah, just like you know, a lot of people, so many people who are into fine chocolate don't have a background as a chef, as they didn't train for many years. They didn't work many years in kitchens before they got into chocolate. They worked with cars, or they worked with engineering or marketing or whatever it is. So you never know who's going to be the next incredible chocolate maker,
Yeah. I mean, it takes a very, very diverse set of skills, I think, to pull this off.
Yeah.
And lateral thinking and science are two of the biggest things. The artistic side of it and the creative side is just a tiny piece. You've got massive problems that you need to solve. And I can't stand the kind of paint by numbers way of doing things in anything, where someone just kind of, like recipes on the internet or anything. You need 700 grams of cocoa nibs, 300 grams of sugar, put it in a machine, you've got chocolate. Yeah. The skills, the techniques, the when, the how, none of that is there. It's just a recipe.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's almost like learning how
time and experience.
Learning how to be an artist, learning how to be a musician. It's going to take a lot of years learning how to use your tools and how to train your ear, right? As a chocolate maker, learning how to use your tools, learning how to use your palate and your brain and all that sort of stuff. It's going to take many years. It's not something you can just figure out in a week.
Like music or painting or everything, you need to learn technique. You need to learn why and how and for how long. You need to learn all of this stuff and do it so much that you get to the point where you don't think about it anymore. And that takes a long, long time. It takes many, 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 many hours of practice, many years of practice, so that you can express yourself. A musician that is thinking about the notes that they're playing is not playing. They're thinking about notes. So an artist doesn't sit there and think about the technique they're using with their paintbrush. They're painting. But to be able to do that, you've got to do the hard work, and the hard work takes time. And again, I don't think it's stressed hard enough that you need to fail, that you need to do this and throw chocolate in the garbage bin until you get to the point where you understand what you're doing, and then you don't need to think about it a whole lot. It should be that simple, but you've got to put in the hard yards. Everyone wants to be a famous musician, but they don't want to practice. People want to be a great chocolatier.
I say that a lot about chocolate tasters. A lot of people now want to start up a chocolate tasting company or want to be a chocolate sommelier. And if you think about it for a moment, that's wonderful that you have that enthusiasm. But for me, for many years, I couldn't even call myself one, because I'm like, I don't feel like an expert yet, even though, I have the same knowledge as the person who taught me. It's like, you're an expert in a field. It's going to take years of training and discovery to be at that level, that confident level. It's not something you're just going to achieve in a weekly course or something like that. And I think because it's chocolate, people think it's very easy, very simplistic. But I think chocolate's more complex than
I think
coffee, wine, cheese.
Oh, definitely. And I think things like craft beer are in the same kind of vein, that people love the idea of making their own beer and drinking it with their mates. It's great. But again, it doesn't make you, the amount of craft beer I've had over the years that is just, there's some big breweries all over the world that are what you could call commercial, that make great products. To be dismissive of things just because they're industrial is wrong. And to support things just because they're craft is wrong. There's lessons on all sides. We've got great industrial chocolate. We've got terrible industrial chocolate. We can't paint a big brush through the whole thing and say industry is bad.
Yeah.
Because, the way the craft chocolate industry is at the moment isn't exactly environmentally friendly or sustainable itself. You can't have 10,000 little companies buying 1 kilo bags of cocoa and shipping them around the world. And that doesn't help cocoa farmers. It doesn't really. But I like to think of it as kind of the infancy of the industry, that over time it will evolve into hopefully better quality, more widely spread chocolate, where we can kind of go back to the earlier times where what you buy in the supermarket is just of a better quality. How we get there, I don't know. But I don't see the current model as a sustainable model at all. But much like with beer brewing or anything, there's nothing wrong with making it at home. There's nothing wrong with making bigger batches and having parties. But there's certain scales you need to get to make consistent quality good beer, because fermentation changes, as you go up.
You have to be willing to be honest with yourself, just like my nonno used to make his own wine from scratch, and it was really good on a salad as vinegar, not so much good to drink all the time. But he loved it, he believed in it, and it's like, okay, have your fun with it. But you have to be honest if you want to start selling it and be like, is this really that great?
Yeah, and I mean, this trickles down even into food. Like people, because of shows like MasterChef and all this kind of stuff, people feel like they're supposed to be an expert in the kitchen.
Right.
It's okay if your food isn't perfect. It's okay but what it should do is give you appreciation for real professionals.
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that people can go into restaurants and kind of dissect everything on the plate and critique everything like they could do better if they were to go out there, without having the context of what's going on in that kitchen, the absolute nightmare that it is in there right now, and that they can send you out a plate of food that is really well put together. And it's not MasterChef, this is reality. And chocolate's no different, beer is no different. But when you put yourself out there and you open a big brewery and your beer is subpar, I don't think there's any excuse for that. It shouldn't happen. But yeah, I don't know how people feel about that. We don't have a big enough discussion on the subject.
Yeah.
I think people know enough to get themselves in trouble, but we're not experts at everything. So at least if we do cook at home, we can appreciate good cooking. We know it when we see it. And the time and energy someone has put into that product, so you're less of an ass about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And more
humble,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't do better if you put yourself in that position. So give them a break. They might just be having a bad day, or society has become very intolerant of anything that isn't exactly the way people want it to be.
Wow, you have a lot of really nice views on food and this sort of stuff. So if you have the time one day, you really should start doing podcasts or videos yourself talking about these ideas. I think it'd be really good.
My wife would kill me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Trevor. It's really nice to discuss all these aspects with you and learn more about your company and just how you think as a maker. And I hope a lot of people out there learned a lot from this. There's a lot to learn from this, and whether you're eating chocolate or making chocolate, and I hope there's something that you took out of our conversation here. But I wish you well with your company. I hope you continue to thrive in the face of all these challenges that are going on in the craft chocolate world. And I hope a lot more people start to appreciate the incredible work that you're doing.
Us too. Thanks for having the chat. I'd be here for hours, but
me too. Maybe I'll come around. We'll do another chat one day. That'll be fun.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Trevor.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Download the free Bean2Bar app to connect with incredible chocolate makers from around the world. Also be sure to visit bean2barworld.com, your portal for all things fine chocolate, virtual tastings, free learning resources, research, and much more. Subscribe to the newsletter to stay in touch, and donate to the free app and free resources here. Contact me for any chocolate-related questions you may have.